Fakes left, now taken off. Gonna run for it. They got it! There it goes! 6 or the 10 to 5. Oh, the play of the year in the NFL.
526 NHL season is underway. I couldn't be more excited. Another season where Buds and Pucks and Buds Mafia can shine during the NHL season, have stuff to talk about instead of trying to figure stuff to talk about during the off season. One of my favorite things about during the season, besides is watching hockey, whether it's the Leafs or anyone else on any given night, I like looking at behind the scenes, looking at Elliot Friedman's tweets, looking to see what stars are on the move. Obviously, maybe there's some stars that could have been moved last year, that were moved last year, that were talked about last year, maybe who might get moved this year. I love all that type of shit. Talking about it in the off season, seeing what can happen this season. Teams want to get better and better to push for that Stanley Cup and beat the Florida Panthers, most likely. So this video, I'm going to be talking about some potential stars or breakout stars that could be on the move. I think there's a solid chance. I'm not guaranteeing I think they're on the move. But for this video, I'm going to be talking about some stars that could be on the move this season and some potential teams I can see them going to. Let's dive into it. Before we get started, please comment, like, subscribe on my YouTube channel, Buds Mafia. We're on YouTube as well as Spotify, and going to check out Buds and Pucks is where I post all the clips from this podcast and daily segments as well. So please show some love, and let's get to it. First player I can see to be traded in 25-26, and this is no come of a shock. He was likely to be traded last year, or was talking to maybe this offseason as well, and that's Buffalo Sabres defenseman Bowen Byram. Not really a star yet, but if he's given more of a role, we've seen what he can do in Colorado and in Buffalo last year. Great season with over 40 points. Great defenseman, left-handed shot. He's on a 2-year deal at 6.25 AAV, and in 2 years he will be a UFA at 26 years old. I think a lot of teams will be liking this player, especially if Buffalo is having the same season as they usually have. And some potential suitors I like are Detroit, LA, the Toronto Maple Leafs, and St. Louis. Let's start with Detroit. So Detroit, they're in a very, very tough Atlantic division. They have just over $11 million in cap space. They have a first and second rounder this year. They have a second round pick in 2027 and a first and second round pick in 2028. Next season, they're expected to have $41 million in cap space, with UFAs as Kane, Sherratt, Gustafsson, Edvinsson, and Talbot. Edvinsson is an RFA. In 27-28, they'll have $77 million in cap space, with the Brinkett, Kopp, Casper, RFA, and Jobkinson goalie as a UFA. And in the following season, $88 million in cap space, JT Coffer, Rasmussen, and Sandy Pellikka. Sandy Pellikka will be an RFA. Again, these are cap projections. We're seeing that it could be even higher, but as of right now, that's what I follow on Puckpedia. I trust them the most with cap-related issues. So for Detroit, they're looking to make that next jump. They've been so close to the playoffs. It seems like for 3/4 of the season, they're likely to get it in, and then they crumble at the end. I like their forward core. I think they can improve some more depth. Detroit is tough for Bowen Byram because Buffalo, I could only see them trading Buffalo or Byram if they're just a complete dog shit again. If they're in the same spot as Detroit and maybe 5 to 8 points out, I can't see him being moved, especially to a rival, or not rival, but division team in Detroit, because last year they weren't too far apart in points. But if Buffalo is a complete in the shitter, and Detroit is pushing against teams like Montreal and Ottawa and Toronto, Tampa, Florida, a lot of that, I can definitely see them making this move. They have the cap space. They have the assets. A top 4 future of Edvinsson and Seider, left shot, right shot, and then Byram and Sandin Pellikka as that top 4. Sounds really good to me. Or maybe even Byram, Seider, blah, blah, whatever it is. Detroit has a lot to give up. They could give up a first, a second. Obviously, with last year's trade deadline, we saw first go for a player like Scott Lawton, which isn't always the case every year. Depends on the market. Sometimes the buyer's market, sometimes the seller's market. They're willing to just get rid of a player for anything they can, or there's such a high need for any type of player to boost your team. And again, for a guy like Carlo or Lawton, you can get a first round pick, but that market can change year by year. For Byram, again, I don't know what his ceiling is. mid-20s player, can get 40 points every season, great skater, could be great for a second unit power play. Detroit could trade a first, a low-end prospect. I can't see them getting rid of a new prospect like Bear. I think they're very high of him, and he's drafted in the first round, but Detroit's a definite team I could see Byram going to. Next team is LA. There could be a lot of turnover after this season, especially with Kopitar retiring. They have just under $2 million in cap space. They have their first and second round picks for 2026, 2027, and 2028. So they have a lot of picks to use from in case of a trade. Next season, they'll have just over $33 million in cap space. Kopitar will be retiring. Kempe's a UFA, but likely to sign a $12 million deal or shy of that 11. Say around just over $20 million in cap space. They'll have Kuzmenko as UFA, Perry UFA, and Brent Clark will be an RFA. The following season, 27-28 cap space, $74 million. Deneau will be a UFA, Fogle will be UFA, Armia, Turcotte, RFA, Doughty will be UFA, so that's a lot of money coming off the books. I'm sure Doughty would like to stay on a cheaper deal, and Kemper UFA. And in the following season, just over $90 million more, Lafreniere, Dumoulin, and Edmondson. Again, I think this would be a great trade for LA and Buffalo. Buffalo, again, in the sense of they wouldn't, if Buffalo was trading Byram, it's not because they're looking to playoff push. It's because they want to dump assets and get some return and for a 16th year of a rebuild, right? So they wouldn't do it for too much. I think a first and a second and maybe one of LA's prospects. Byram's not one of those players where as a unicorn, it's hard to put a value on a player like that. I think he's very good and a lot of teams would like him. But I don't think the demand would be, or the return would have to be exponential for LA to acquire a player like this. Again, they have Mikey Andersson, Brant Clark, still Doughty in the mix. Brant Clark will likely be that power play one guy of the future, and Bowen Byram can come in very nicely to slot into that second role. The next team is, of course, my Toronto Maple Leafs. They have, as of right now, it looks like they have around just $20,000 in cap space. Not a lot of draft picks to choose from. They have a 2027 second round pick and then a first till 2028. Next year, they'll have just under $21 million in cap space, with Michelli being an RFA, Lawton a UFA, McMahon a UFA. The following season, they'll have $40 million in cap space with Nicolas Waugh a UFA, Carla UFA, Benoit UFA. And then the following season is the big one, 28-29. They'll have just under $70 million. And that's when our captain, Austin Matthews, will be an RFA, and goaltender Joseph Woll. For Toronto, I know a lot of people like to say I do like their D-core. I do really like it, but they're missing that number one guy. And I know in the previous teams, I'm saying Bowen Byram's not likely to be a number one guy. I think he would get a lot more minutes on Toronto, maybe be on that number one power play instead of Riley, let some pressure off of Riley. In terms of value going back to Buffalo, again, Toronto have to give up a lot. They would have to probably give up their 2028 first. Maybe one of their prospects. I would rather them trade Cowan instead of Danford. I like the potential of Danford. But again, with cap space as well and roster spot, maybe a Carlo would have to go as well because he makes $3 to $4 million like that, and there'd have to be some shuffling around. $6 million for Byram is easy to navigate, I feel like, so they could work something out. I don't see a team like Toronto going at him, but or at least too much. I mean, I do think they would be in the mix, but I do, again, in terms of division and maybe assets, I do like the previous teams more, and maybe this next team as well. Next team would be St. Louis. They don't have a lot of cap space as of right now. They have $625,000. They have their first next year, on the year after, and in 2028 with only one second round pick within those 3 years. They have just over $25 million in cap space the following year, with Joseph Holloway being an RFA, who's likely to get a big pay bump. Same thing with Broberg, maybe even Mailloux, but he's depending on this season. And Texier, the following season, they'll just under $70 million, with Suter, our UFA, Neighbors, who will be an RFA, Snuggerud will be an RFA. I mean, who knows? He could have back-to-back 50-point seasons, and they offer him $9 million because of the cap space. We'll never know. Hulk UFA, Krug UFA, Binnington, Hofer, and in the following season, just over 76, and Braden Shen will be a UFA. I like this deal because it would be better if he was a righty to maybe go alongside of Broberg But you have Mayu as well, so he would be a great third defenseman. Maybe he's used to playing as offside with the lean, so having him maybe with Fowler would be awesome. Krug's likely going to be out for a long time. For Justin Folk's getting older. They can maneuver some picks or move some cap space. I mean, they have the picks to trade for him. There likely would need to be a decent prospect going the other way. Maybe a Neighbors. I know this team is really high on Neighbors, so I can't see them giving him up. But if they're really interested in getting, Buffalo's really needs something back, they may have to give a player like Neighbors. But it depends on the need and how they like their decor at that point. Obviously, they have Parayko as well. But I do like St. Louis bolstering that decor for the future as well. Next player that I can definitely see being traded in 25-26 is Calgary Flames center Nazem Kadri. The teams I like him going to, I don't like Toronto. I do think I like their centerman. I don't think Toronto would be a good fit for Kadri, nor do I think they need him. Or if he wants to come back, I don't know about that. But teams I like who I think could use some centerman and some grit combination would be Montreal, Carolina, and the New Jersey Devils. Kadri has 4 years left at $7 million AAV, coming off over a 30-goal season. I think he led the team in scoring or top 3 in scoring. When done at the end of his contract, he'll be 38 years old, but you'll still get some great years out of Kadri, some toughness, some grittiness. Let's break down Montreal first. So Montreal, they've been desperately looking for that second line center. I am firmly a believer in Nick Suzuki in being that first line center. Just around 90 points. I think he has more to his game. Great defensively. I'm hooked on him being a number one center, but they need that second line center. I've always believed in Doc, but with injuries derailing him and everything, I just don't think they should be relying on him to finally find his game. I like Newhook, but I think if you can get a guy like Kadri, second line center, I like this team even more. And as a Leaf fan, it scares the fucking shit out of me. This is dependent if they don't get Crosby. I mean, well, maybe he'll be one of the few players in this video, but I like Sidney Crosby of Montreal. But if they can't, I'm sure they'll be all in on Kadri. He makes a good amount of money, can add some toughness to that core. Let's break down why the Canadiens make sense. So a trade to kind of compare this to would be like the Brock Nelson trade last year. Colorado had to give up a first and a very, very decent prospect in Callum Ritchie. I would say they're similar value, maybe Kadri even more, because they put up around similar points, but Kadri adds that playoff style grit. He's a tad bit younger than Brock Nelson, so maybe even more. But Montreal, they have a ton to work with. They have $5.53 million in cap space, so maneuvering that would be hard to bring in Kadri's $7 million contract. They have first this year, 2 seconds. They have a first and second the following year, and a first and second in 2028. Next year, they'll have $36.73 million projected. They'll have Line A UFA. They'll have Doc RFA, Bolduc RFA, and of course Lane Hudson UFA or RFA. And just say for the max value, he signs $10 million. And that would still bring him around $26 million. So it wouldn't be too bad for Kadri. Following year, they'll have Gallagher, Andersson, Newhook, Montembeault, and then Demidov, who, again, with the cap going up at that point in time, could be making $12 million. We'll never know with these Russians sometimes. But they'll still have over $72 million in cap space. Then the following season, similar value. Again, I think a center core of Suzuki, Kadri, and Newhook makes a lot of sense, and Jake Evans maybe slots in the third role instead of Newhook, and Newhook plays the wing sometimes. I really like that depth, that top 9. Offers-wise, it would obviously have to be a first and maybe a second, and again, to compare to that Brock Nelson deal, maybe even a player like Owen Beck. I don't think they'd want to give up a player like Michael Hague. I think they're very high on Michael Hague. He's already dominating at Michigan. But you never know. Let's kind of backtrack a bit for Calgary. People are high on Calgary. I think Calgary had a career year last year, or they surprised a lot of people, I should say more. And I just don't see them replicating that. I think they're a great team, have a bright future with Parekh, Dustin Wolf. But I think they are likely for a downfall, and I think Kadri could get a lot of interest, gain a lot of interest from a ton of teams. especially like Montreal needing that second line center, maybe even number one center for your team. And again, if they're getting rid of a player like Kadri, they won't need a player necessarily right away. They can get a player like Beck, who's likely to be on Montreal this year. I am filming this before the season, by the way, just letting you guys know. So yeah, I think a first, a second, and maybe a prospect like Becker and someone else in the system. I don't think they'd want to get rid of Haig. If they did get rid of Haig, they wouldn't likely have to give up much else. Maybe not even a first along with that, because I think this kid is going to be a stud. But if Montreal wants to be aggressive, push for that top position in the Atlantic, I think Kadri would be a great fit for Montreal. Next up, I have the Carolina Hurricanes. This team is going to be all in for a while. They have a lot of guys locked up for quite some time. They have just over $10.5 million in cap space. They have first this year, first next year, and 2 firsts in 2028. They'll have just over $16 million in cap space next offseason with Necas as an RFA, so that could cause some trouble, but we'll see. But in the following year, just some veterans, UFA. They'll go check out UFA, but they'll figure that out. And yeah, just this team's going to be all in for a while. They got Nikolai Ehlers. They have their whole core locked up with Jackson's Blake, Stankoven, Aho, Jarvis, Svechnikov, obviously Ehlers, like I just said. I do like Stankoven as that future number 1 or number 2 center. Obviously, they have Aho as well. But if they want to get even tougher, I feel like they've gotten bullied quite a bit in the playoffs this past year. They'll get to the conference finals every fucking year, but they play a team like Florida, and sometimes they get bullied quite a bit. They rely on their speed. I think a player like Kadri could really help them out. I don't think it's a bad thing for Kadri to fill in that center role. Maybe move Stankoven to the wing. I know he has just some term on their deal. I feel like they would rather have him at a 1 year left on his deal, maybe as more of a rental. But for Carolina, again, I think they have the assets. They've traded a lot of their prospects like Morrow for the Keandre Miller trade. They still have Nikishin, of course, but they have some prospects in the pipeline that they could pair with like a first round pick to get Kadri, and they definitely have the cap space to do it. So they wouldn't have to give up much of a roster player for Calgary. I do like Carolina for this spot. Finally, the New Jersey Devils, a team with a ton of skill, with tons of health issues in the past, could use a centerman like Kadri for grit and toughness. Again, I know they have Heischer, I know they have Hughes. They could use some maneuvering. They could do some roster change lineup, or even have him as a third line center. But really, that top 9 does a good round of rotations. They could use some grit. They have $4 million in cap space right now. They have their first round pick, second round pick for this year, 2027 and 2028. So they have the draft picks. Next season, they'll have $50 million in cap space with Nemec, RFA, Markstrom, UFA. Mainly just Markstrom, but they can work around that. I'm sure he'll re-sign. Then the following season, they'll have $52 million in cap space. They'll have to sign Nico. They'll have to sign Mercer and RFA. And then the following season at $65 million in cap space for 2029 will be Dougie Hamilton. This team does have a ton of prospects, I would say. But I do think they can make this work with the draft pick. Again, comparing to the Brock Nelson trade, maybe a draft pick. Maybe they give up a player like a Mercer or a Nemec. If Calgary wants to take a stab at a player like Nemec, who really hasn't found his groove yet, but former second overall pick, I think you can get a deal done for Calgary. Again, for New Jersey, I feel like you'd rather this be a rental. That's why I don't have him too high on this list, because he has 4 years left. But at $7 million in this new cap era, shouldn't be too hard for New Jersey to work this out. And I feel like it could be good good fit for him. Next player on this list is Rasmus Andersson. We've been hearing Rasmus Andersson to Dallas and Vegas for quite some time, and he is going to be cost a pretty bargain. He's got 1 year left at just 4.5 AAV. He'll be 29 years old next offseason. Likely get a big pay bump, especially with this new salary cap. And like I said, I do like Dallas. I do like Vegas. It's going to be hard for them to figure this out with their cap space. I do also like Toronto and Carolina as well, more for rentals, especially with Toronto. But let's break this down. So for Dallas, they're currently over the cap limit, but I'm sure there'll be some game day or opening day kind of adjustments to figure that out. They only have a 2026 second and 2027 first and second. Right now, they don't have anything in 2028 in terms of first and second. Next year, they have $27 million in cap space, but they'll have to sign Robertson and RFA. They'll have to sign Harley and RFA. They'll have Maverick Bork, RFA, and Ben. Likely retirement, but we'll see. Hopefully he's okay with his collapse lung. Next offseason, $56 million in cap space. Bischel, RFA, really like Bischel. Seguin, UFA. Then the following season, $58 million. Rasmus Anderson's an interesting case. Like, it's hard to think of a trade in the last few years that's happened of a player who can get you 30, 40 points, as tough as nails, right-handed shot defenseman, top four, can play on any kind of pairing you want. Great in the locker room. I've been hearing Dallas quite a bit, as well as Vegas. It would definitely have to be a first-round pick going to Calgary. Could they re-sign him? Unknown. It would likely be a rental for some of these teams, just because even though he's at a great value right now, they're going to have to pay him quite a bit afterwards. But I do like Dallas. It'll have to be a draft pick. It'll have to be a player like Maverick Bourque going the other way. Maybe even a player like Liam Bichsel. I know they're very high on him, but if they're willing to get a player like Rasmus Andersson for that right side, because their right side has been not the greatest. The left side, they have Harley, Heiskanen, Lindell. I know Lindell's probably play the right side, or Miro to kind of switch to swap, same as Harley. But if they can bolster that right side with not just any defenseman like a Rasmus Andersson, I think it would be worth listening to Liam Bichsel for a trade for Rasmus Andersson. Now for Vegas, they're right now technically, just under $9 million over the cap limit, but that's likely before the Alex Pietrangelo done for the entire season. They'll likely be just around right for the cap space. They'll have a second for next year, as well as a first and second for the following 2 seasons. Next year, they'll have $18 million in cap space. They'll have a lot of players assigned, like Eichel, Riley Smith, Dorofeyev's an RFA. Eichel's likely to sign a $13 million deal, so they don't have a ton of cap space. This could likely just be a rental. But for Vegas, they always find a way. I don't know what it is, but they always find a way. And a player I can see them moving on from if they don't want to deal with the RFA is Dorofeyev. I know he had to come off a career year. His value will be very high. He had 35 goals last year. I know that sounds crazy, but for Vegas to kind of refill that right side with Pietrangelo, likely career done, which I hate to say, and a Dorofeyev where they don't have to deal with an RFA, it would likely have to be a sign and trade for Dorofeyev for Rasmus Andersson. But if you're Calgary, you get a player who, yes, play with some really good players, put up 35 goals, go right into that system. They don't have to worry about cap space for a while for Calgary. Can kind of grow in that team, get a bigger role. Again, they can trade a first-round pick maybe along with it. I don't think they'd have to. Vegas also has a Trevor Connolly, a very highly touted prospect who will likely be on the opening day roster. And the following year, in 27-28, they'll have $54 million in cap space, but then you'll have Carlson, Mark Stone, Pietrangelo will technically be up. We'll see where his career is. And in the following year, almost $70 million at Barbashev, McNabb, and Whitecloud UFA. But again, it'll be tough to give up Dorofeyev for just a rental in Rasmus Andersson, but Vegas isn't afraid to put their balls on the table, and we've been hearing about Vegas for Rasmus Andersson for quite a while. Now Toronto, I've already kind of breaking down their cap space and everything. Again, I would love Rasmus Andersson, a Toronto fan. I don't know how we'd make it work. Again, it would have to be like a Carlo, a first-round pick, and likely, I think Calgary would like Danford coming away. I think they'd also like Cowan, but it would take a lot. With Toronto and their cap space, I don't know if it would actually be a rental because they will have just around $21 million in cap space. They do have to be careful with Matthews in the next few years, but they do have some guys locked up for quite a while. So I don't think it would be too much of an issue, even if it's like an $8-9 million contract. I know it sounds like a lot, but we're in a new era, so take that in mind. Would I like to keep Danford, excuse me? Yes, I would, but I would be willing to give Cowan and Carlo in a first. I don't know if that would get it done. But if you're Calgary, getting a veteran defenseman, getting some draft value, as well as I would say a highly touted prospect as well, I think Calgary would like it. And now Carolina, I've already broken them down. They have the cap space. They could give up 2 firsts. And I know it sounds like a lot for Rasmus Andersson, but again, and they could re-sign him as well. There's no issue there. Losing Brent Burns on that right side, I do still like their defensemen with Slavin, Nikishin, Shane Walker as well. But getting another defenseman like Rasmus Andersson on that right side, again, maybe a rental. They probably wouldn't give up that much value for a rental as well, but they could flirt around with some of their draft picks, and they have tons of cap space, like I said, to deal with it. So I don't think they would be an extension per se, but they definitely like use him as a rental for a playoff run. Next player, this one's very interesting. He is on Buffalo. He's a New York native. He's loved it there. but I'm not sure how much Buffalo's willing to pay this guy, and that's Alex Tuch. He has 1 year left at 4.75 AAV. He'll be 30 years old next offseason, and some teams I like is Columbus, Calgary, and the Colorado Avalanche. Alex Tuch, I think, would acquire a lot of value going the other way. He can fly, right-handed shot winger, can get you 30 and 30 every season. Is physical, is gritty. I think he would cost quite a bit, especially if he was just a rental at that value, would cost a lot. I like Columbus because they're a team trying to break through, trying to get to that next step. And they were close last year. They fell short just at the end. They have $14 million in cap space. They have a first in every year for the next 3 years. They have a second in 27 and 28. Next season, they'll have $46 million in cap space. They'll have to sign Fantilli, they'll sign Chinakov, they'll sign Sillinger, Jenner, and Coyle. A lot of guys they can let go, as well as good Branson. Fantilli will likely get that big number with the salary cap going up. Following year, they'll have Matenchuk, Marchenko will acquire a lot of money, Voronikov, Ken Johnson, Merzlinkin, and next season, 2029, they'll have Zach Werenski, who could be the first $20 million player. We'll see. And they'll have $83 million in cap space. I think he's that power forward speed they've been looking for quite a while, and I think they'd be willing to give up like a Ken Johnson for him, especially if it's a sign and trade. Is that a place that I can see Alex Tuch signing long-term for? I'm not sure, but I think a Ken Johnson and a first-round pick, or maybe even just Ken Johnson, a second-round pick for a sign-and-trade Alex Tuch would work for Columbus and Calgary. Again, Calgary would only trade this for a player of the future or for a ton of draft capital because they would only trade him, or Buffalo, excuse me, would only trade him, because I was thinking of Calgary. Buffalo would only trade him, again, if they're just dog shit again and looking for the future. Ken Johnson, they have tons of centermen, I know, in Tage Thompson. They got Josh Norris and they have Jack Quinn, but I think Ken Johnson can be a very, very solid second line center behind Tage Thompson. I don't think Buffalo would ask for too much besides Johnson, maybe a first, but I do like Alex Tuch for Columbus. And I do think this makes a lot of sense. Next, I have, surprisingly, I have the Calgary Flames. This trade would happen if what happened with Calgary is not what I predicted. If they keep going on this run, keep evolving, Wolf's now a Vezina candidate, and just Zane Parek's an awesome star. He refines his game, and they're just better than what I think they are. That's the only way I can see this happening. They'll have just under $10 million in cap space. They have their first and second for the next 3 years. They'll have just under $25 million next year in cap space with only signing with Rasmus Andersson. That'll be it. 27-28, they'll have $47 million, which is Frost and Coleman. And the following year, they'll Farabee, Zari and RFA, Parek and RFA, and Backlund UFA at $62 million. So they definitely could pay him what he wants. I'm not sure if it's probably a double-digit number, as in like $10 billion a year, or maybe even more with the cap. Again, I think just that winger long. I think Craig Conroy would love this type of player. Heavy, speed, can shoot the puck. Can really play with some of their young players coming up. And I think Calgary, in terms of value they have to give up for Buffalo, maybe it's a Rasmus Andersson swap. I doubt it. I don't think Rasmus Andersson would sign long-term in Buffalo, but Calgary, they can find some of their B-plus prospects. They actually have 2 first-round picks, so they can flirt with that. They can definitely give up one of those, maybe even a second. If you're Buffalo, I think you would take that. Maybe give up some roster player like a Farabee, Frost. I know that's maybe not a ton of space, but they have some kind of B to B plus prospects at Calgary they can give up, and I think it would fit well if Calgary was a competitive team, which I'm not sure about yet. Next, I have Colorado. This may come as a shock. They're just over the cap space, and again, there's going to be some game day likely moves that would happen. They have their first they don't have anything in 2026 in terms of high-end draft value, but next year they have their first, 2 seconds, and the following year in 2028 they have first and second. Next year they're likely going to have just under $27 million in cap space. Necas, of course, an UFA, Drury RFA, Olofsson UFA, Brinley RFA, and Burns UFA. Then the following season is the big one in 27-28. Just under $60 million in cap space, and Makar will be in UFA, which again, to back the Brinks trucks up. I know looking at cap space and value, what are they going to have to give up? It's just going to be straight draft capital. It could be straight up a 2027, 28 first. Because again, if Buffalo's trading Alex Tuch, they're likely not going to be a competitive team, and they're likely heading for the dumpster as well. But again, in terms of cap, maybe there can be some retention, and it's just a rental for Colorado. Or if Buffalo still wants to remain competitive and they're looking at a Necas. I know that sounds wild. I can't see Necas signing in Buffalo, but Buffalo could probably pay him the bag, and maybe that's all he wants. And maybe him and Tage can put up 90 to 100 points every year. And then maybe Colorado gets a different style of player in Tuch who may be better suited for the playoffs. It's an interesting one. I think Tuch would be an interesting move for Buffalo because I do think he wants to stay, and it's hard for players to want to stay in Buffalo. But if he was ever made available, I think teams would come banging on Buffalo's door because he can ask for a lot, or teams can ask for a lot because he's a playoff style type of player that needs to be in the playoffs. All right, last two players here. One, this shouldn't come as much of a surprise, and it's Martin Necas. 1 year left at $6.5 million AAV. He'll be 26 years old. I still think a deal's going to get done. I just think it's fucking hilarious that, they weren't willing to pay rent in 8x12, and they're likely going to have to do the same thing with Necas. But if Joe Sakic and the rest of the Colorado management wants to fuck around and do something like this again, I can see Necas being moved for someone else like Alex Tuch, like I was saying. But also, again, this trade's a lot more interesting because for Colorado, if they trade Martin Necas, they're not willing to just accept draft picks. They want to be a competitive team. They have McKinnon, they have Makar. They want to be a competitive team. So this is where things get a little bit more interesting. Where other teams like if they're trading Kadri, they're trading Tuch, they're trading Rasmus Andersson, they're trading Kadri. Those teams are likely not going to be good. So they're okay with not getting a player ready right now, more just draft capital and prospects. But Colorado, they're still a top team in that Central, top team in the league, and they can't just accept that. They need a solid player coming the other way. And the teams I like, no shock, I'll say Toronto, but I'll talk about why. Vancouver and Winnipeg, 3 Canadian teams. So Toronto, like I said, I already broke down their cap space. They don't have a lot right now. They don't have a ton of draft capital till 2028. They'll have a ton of cap space next year. I like it because say Michelli or Domi, say Matthews and Nyes are really putting up, but just they keep swapping out Michelli and Domi, and that pairing is just not working out well. Michelli is doing all right, but they hear Martin Necas is on the move and they can snag. I think a deal that for a late first, Michelli and Cowan would get this deal done for Colorado for a sign and trade to get Martin Necas in Toronto. I think a first line of Nyes, Matthews, and Necas is absolutely elite. And for Colorado, you get a first that maybe you can flip again in before the trade deadline for another player. You're relieving a little bit of cap space with getting Michelli. Maybe Toronto would likely need some retention for this deal to happen, but I'm sure won't that be too much of a deal. And you're getting a prospect like Cowan, who's likely going to be playing this year and maybe can fit on the roster right away. There could be more that needs to happen, but I do think if Colorado, their Martin Necas is asking for a ton and they don't want to pay him that, he has all the leverage. So again, it's just more like getting a deal done. And again, Michelli, we haven't seen him play this year yet, but I do feel like he's a player, a skillful player who can fit on a bunch of different lines. And if he plays with a guy like McKinnon and Nichushkin, Landeskog, all that, Lehkonen, he can just put up a good amount of points to a good filler player who's a lot cheaper than Necas. So we'll see. I doubt this one happens, but that's a potential suitor I have. Next, I have Vancouver, where I heard rumors of this for a while ago, especially with PD. So right now, they just have under $500,000 in cap space. They have their first and second this year. They have their first next year, and they have their 2028 first and second in 2028. Next year, they'll have $18 million in cap space with just Vander Kane and Sherwood as UFAs. And then the following season, the big one with $50 million in cap space with Hedel, Mack will be an RFA, then Quinn Hughes will be a UFA, and there's a chance you could be making $18 million. Likely a bit less, but you never really know, right? Defensemen maybe don't get paid more as that marquee player like Kaprizov. So for Colorado, this is tough because again, Vancouver doesn't have a ton of players to work with for in terms of value that could help Colorado right away. Maybe like Ramaki has a great year, but they're willing to get rid of that for a highly more respected player like Necas, who's proven a lot more. And again, Vancouver could trade a first, 2 firsts, maybe a second, and along with there, and Ramaki for Necas. Again, they might need some help with the cap space for Vancouver. But that's just a trade where you're proving to Quinn Hughes that you're trying to be the best team you can, try to keep pushing for that playoffs. I think Vancouver can still make the playoffs, but we'll see. They don't have a lot of cap space, but I'm sure they can get something done with Nature, so they'll have some more cap space the following season. And yeah, it's just trying to get Quinn Hughes to stay, and I think they could probably figure out a deal with like Ramaki with Colorado, but we'll see. Or maybe a Filipino. So next, I have the Winnipeg Jets. Like I said, right now they have just over $1 million in cap space. They have their first for the next 3 years, not a lot of second-round picks. Next offseason, they'll have $27.5 million in cap space. They'll have Nyquist, Lowry, Perfetti, who's an RFA, obviously Johnny Taves, Logan Stanley. But I'm sure they can figure that out. And next season, they'll have $48 million in cap space with Nemestikov and Brad Lambert. And in the following season, $70 million with Josh Morrissey, who will require a lot of money, Sandberg as well, and Iafallo. For Winnipeg, I think this makes a lot of sense. You get a player who plays a similar style of Nikolai Ehlers for that right side. To maybe play with Connor, play with Scheifele. That'd be a great top line. You can pay him the money that he wants, that you're willing to pay Nikolai Ehlers. You'd likely have to give up a player like Perfetti, but I don't think that's that bad. I think that works great for Colorado. You get a young star, potential star who has proven it at times, maybe a bit inconsistent, but maybe pairing with a guy like McKinnon or playing right behind a player like McKinnon can produce a lot more numbers, getting a new change of scenery, see what that happens to players. Colorado can pay him that contract a lot less than what they'd have to pay Necas. Winnipeg can pay Necas. And then you have a line of Scheifele, Connor, and Necas, and then you have Velarde on that second line. Maybe with the Nemestikov. I know they're maybe thinking more for Freddie to be more of the future, but if you can kind of get a player like Necas to replace a player like Ehlers, you have draft picks to pair with Perfetti for Colorado if needed. I think that deal will work out well for both sides. Now, the final player that I'll be talking about too. I would hate this as a Leaf fan, but as just a hockey and sports fan, this would be incredible. And there's only one team that I'm really going to be talking about that I can see him going to. And the player is, of course, it's on the thumbnail, is Sidney Crosby. He has 2 years left at $8.7 million. He'll be 39 years old at the end of that deal. And again, like I said, I can only see him going to Montreal. I know there's Colorado because of McKinnon. I don't know how they make it work. I don't think it's out of the picture, but to me, it's clearly Montreal is the favorite to get Crosby if he wanted to be moved. And now this is a bit easier for me for Pittsburgh because they're dog shit. The only way he wants out is if they're just so historically bad that he's like, I can't fucking stand this. If they're pushing for the playoffs at any point or in any time of the season, he's not going anywhere. He wants to win, and he wants to win in Pittsburgh more than anywhere else. The only way he would want to leave is if they were complete shit, which they're likely going to be. I don't know if you saw their lineup on opening night against the Rangers in the first. I know they won 3-0, but their one power play unit, I could name you one guy. One guy. It's not a good team. I can't see them keeping this up, and Crosby may get sick and tired of fucking losing. And Montreal would be a great fit. They're looking for that number 2 center. And you get one of the best number 1 centers, but having him and Suzuki as your centerman would be absolutely insane. And again, back to the whole Pittsburgh thing, you wouldn't need players right away. It would strictly be draft capital and prospects. It's hard to put a value on one of the greatest players of all time. Montreal, they have a first and 2 seconds this year. They have a first and second in 2027, and 2028, they also have a first and second. I think Montreal, if there's any sniff of Crosby going there and Kyle Dubas picks up the phone, I think you're willing to give whatever you want or give whatever you need to be besides probably Demidov. I personally wouldn't do that. I think this guy could be the next Kaprizov, and you're trading. Yes, it's for Sidney Crosby, but I would rather the future of Demidov and than Sidney Crosby. I'm just going to say it right there. I know it's crazy, one of my favorite players ever, but You got to bank on that future, and this kid's going to be a stud. But I don't think they'd have to give up Demidov. This year, they have just around $5 million in cap space. 26, 27, they'll have 36. Like I said, only real players they'll have to sign is Hudson, RFA, likely $10 million, so $26 million. Old Duke wouldn't require too much, but I think they definitely should bring him back. Jack Guy wouldn't require too much. Laine likely to the curb. Next year, or the year after, 27, 28, it will be Demidov, RFA, but then you'll have around $72 million in cap space. 4. So for a player like Crosby, it'll likely have to be one of your grade A prospects that's in the system. It'll likely have to be Michael Hague, right? I think Pittsburgh would be all over Michael Hague if Demidov's not available. And legitimately, it would be 2 firsts. I'm trying to look at the value of Mikko Rantanen. I'm not saying Mikko Rantanen's better than Crosby. I know Crosby's aging, but he's still one of the best two-way players in the league, and he's still one of the best centermen, if not the best players in the league. But that's how a value to look at. Mikko Rantanen went for 2 firsts in Logan Stankoven, a very solid top 6 player who's starting to prove it, and tons of potential. So probably even more than that. You probably have to give up your 2026 first, your 2027 first. Fuck it, maybe even both seconds this year in 2026 and Michael Hague. It would cost a lot. It would cost a ton. I know he has 2 more years on his contract. If it was 1 more year, it probably wouldn't cost that much. But you're saying you have 2 more years of Sidney Crosby. This is obviously likely a trade deadline deal, so really, half a year or playoffs in a full season. But that's a lot of really good hockey you're getting out of Sidney Crosby. So it would cost at least 2 first-round picks in Hague, and it would probably cost a lot more. I'm not sure what else it would cost. They have some other playoff or players in the system, maybe even an Owen Beck as well. But I think, again, if you're Montreal, you're giving up whatever you can. I think it was worth it. You need that second-line center, and you're basically getting one of the best centers in the world. So that's it. That's the players I have. Let me know if you fucking think I'm a donkey. I think I'm a donkey sometimes as well. But let me know what you think. Comment, like, subscribe. I'm only at 45 subscribers. It takes a long time to make this type of video. Let me know what you guys think. Go follow me, like I said, on YouTube, Buds Mafia, and Spotify as well. Check out the Buds Mafia podcast with my co-host, Jackson. We talk all things Leafs, all things Bills, and everything in between, as well as Buds and Pucks on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I post daily segments, draft bus, best lineup combinations. I try to think of interesting combinations that are segments that's not just, best player in each franchise's history. I try to be different. I try to find certain segments that will tailor to fans that I was when I was going through Instagram trying to become a content creator as well. So again, comment, like, subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments. Roast me. I don't give a shit. I can take it sometimes. And go follow Buds and Pucks and Buds Mafia. Talk to you later.
Fakes left, now taken off. Gonna run for it. Got it. There he goes.